Hello, and thank you for coming to the 10th Annual Lake County Film Festival. Hopefully you just watched Seasons of Change on Henry's Farm, and I am proud to bring in the director, Ines Sommer, to answer some questions for us. There we go. Hey, how's it going?
Good. Hi, Nat. It's so good to, get like the major cloud that was over our heads out of the way, and now we can focus on the film festival, right?
For people that, I'm archiving all of these. People can watch them anytime, a year from now when, when your movie, somebody catches it online somewhere, they'll be able to see it on YouTube or Facebook. And, I'm pretty excited about that. But so for those who are watching a long time from now, maybe 15 minutes ago, it was called for Biden for president. So our long national nightmare is over.
Wow.
It is a relief. Not only beyond everything else, but not only that, the obvious things, but maybe the less obvious things that your film touches on is the climate change issue that everyone is struggling with. Hopefully that will be something that is now taken seriously. What can you tell me? What's new with Henry? Is he back on the farm? How is the farm doing?
So from what I've been told is that every year is more challenging than the previous year. So Henry is, still farming. He's still coming to the Evanston Farmers Market. They've set up the market in a really great way so people can shop in a socially distant manner. But the constant weather events are getting worse and worse. So in the beginning of this year, he lost basically his entire first crop planting, because there was a drought. Then, sudden rain, like really a lot of rainfall. So all the things that we're touching on in the film in the third act of the film is increased. So he is adapting as much as he can, but it's super labor intensive.
Well, I'm kind of going out of chronological order of what I had here, but I just wonder, as someone who's lived literally across farms for the last 6 years of my life in two different houses. My last house our backyard was literally on a farm, and now I have farms here, and some over here. I find it interesting that his I love diversity. I love diversity in all things. And people keep talking about that with my programming, how my jury members who watched all the docs are like, oh, they're so different. It's not just centered on any individual thing. And while I have seen all the climate problems happening, especially all the rain, as I've lived across from these farms, they don't seem like a big deal to people who have homogeneous farms when they're just, I lived across from a cornfield and it flooded many times, but by the end of the year, everything, was all balanced out. So I find it interesting that it's his diverse nature that is potentially leading to more problems. Did you have any insight on that, or?
I think that's not it's a correlation, but it's not, not the reason, I think, so a lot of the farmers who do conventional farming also do what's called tiling, where they have kind of underground channels, if you want, plastic channels running through that. When rainfall comes, it immediately pushes the water out of the fields. So instead of it slowly getting absorbed, it gets pushed back into streams and so on, right? So that's actually part of what Henry has been trying to avoid, because then you immediately increase the water in the creeks, and that causes flooding as well, right? So for your neighbor down the road. So I think the conventional farmers will also, with a drought, there's nothing, they can do except for maybe, what's the word I'm looking for?
Irrigate more.
Irrigating, right? But in the long run, that's not going to be enough to mitigate the impact of climate change. And then when their crops are failing, then it will be massive for them because they don't have any alternatives. They don't have that diversity. So with Henry, it's not so much that, his crop insurance is really that he has that diversity. So even when some of those crops were failing when there was drought, others were taking. And the same with the plants that were underwater. I think ultimately he's thinking of, he's already created kind of a deeper channel to plant some perennials and so on, maybe fruit trees and so on, and ultimately might have to just move his farm operation to the top of the hill where he has also land, but the soil is not quite as good, right? So that's kind of the trade-off. And I think a lot of these discussions are centered around soil also. He keeps saying in the film, I've built this soil over decades, I think, conventional farmers supplement all of that with chemicals. And, then you can kind of see how the soil, the healthy soil actually gets destroyed by that over time. So.
Yeah. And at the end, when he's just seeing all the soil had washed away, it's a lot of times I say that documentaries are just a snapshot of a certain period, but it does seem like a complete story of this sort of rise and not that it's a fall, but you can see the fall coming. I mean, that is a very upsetting moment to sort of end on and look for the future. So going back chronologically, how did you find Henry? Was it at one of the farmers markets, or how did you stumble across Henry to tell his story?
So there was a young volunteer who wanted to make a short video about Henry's farm. She kind of invited me in, but then she had to drop out for family reasons. So she was really the person who found Henry. And then I got to read my co-producer, Tara Brockman, who's Henry's sister. I got to read her book. It's called Seasons on Henry's Farm. And it's a beautiful book. And once I read this, I'm like, oh, I want to explore this farm and I want to meet this family. So, it wasn't like a film where I was like, oh, I want to do something on sustainable farming and I'm looking for characters. It was more kind of serendipitous. And then once I got to film on the farm, which was supposed to be just one weekend, I really liked the family. I liked what was going on. I thought, oh, just a little bit longer and a little bit longer. So that's the pleasure and the curse of independent documentary filmmaking. If you're doing low budget work, there's no boss to say, hey, there's the deadline, stop filming. So I allowed myself for the story to kind of unfold organically and keep going until it felt like this is complete now.
Is that your like a go-to joke that it grew organically? No, that's great. What I love about documentaries is the way they give us a snapshot into things we haven't seen before, and yours really gives us a snapshot into two different things that we haven't seen before. It's not just his organic farming, which I mentioned when we talked before, because I screen for Nashville and I screen all their Tennessee films. I get a lot of farming films. Okay. And they're always interesting. It's interesting to learn about all that. But then having the Japanese aspect as well is so interesting. How long did you go to Japan, and what was that like? Okay,
so I went to Japan for 0 hours.
Oh, okay. Wow.
I hired a freelance cinematographer in Japan remotely. A Japanese friend of mine helped me find him, and he spent a little bit over a day with Henry and Hiroko. So I gave him a shot list, and we communicated back and forth before he went, and kind of assessed when is the best time to go. Henry suggested this fire festival that we see, and so on. So that's how that came about. And
that's very efficient. That's a substantial chunk of film that definitely seems like fantastic editing because it seems like much longer. Actually, I did want to ask about that. If you're interested, part of these is teaching people about filmmaking, and we had talked before that you finished the film and had sent it out places, but then you did a complete re-edit. Do you want to go into what you learned in the process?
I think one maybe mistake that I made and that other filmmakers make is that we submit our films too early, when they're really still maybe not rough cut, but they're solid fine cuts, and in the hope that reviewers, screeners will look beyond any flaws that the films have, because we have these aspirations to get into major festivals, and that's really something that I hope I'll never do again. We're working towards a deadline. That's how much money I had, and we're like, okay, it's done, right? But then sitting back for, I'd say, a good 6 months, allowed me to have some distance and look at the film with fresh eyes, and that was super helpful, because the elements are basically the same. It was really a restructuring of the first act. How do I pull the viewer in? That changed how people can access the film now. So if that's a lesson, give yourself some time in editing to take a break before you think it's finished, so that you can kind of re-engage with the material in a new way and are not just stuck on, oh, it has to be, wrapped up now. That's our deadline, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that can work for some people. If they have something really unique, I think they can benefit from sparking people's interest early. If you've got kind of a South by Southwest style film, if you've got a wholly unique concept or a filming style that's kinetic, but for this is a film that you have to get engaged narratively as opposed to visually. I think it can help some people, but clearly if you're just trying to tell a story that's interesting, you might need to focus on the story more. If you've got something like a documentary about an air guitar contest or something that they're like, "Whoa, this is gonna be crazy," I think you might benefit a little bit from from early submissions, and some it might really catch someone's eye. But yes, I can see where that would be difficult, because you have to rely on the narrative of your characters. If you've got some off the wall, like the documentary about chicken, showing chickens, competitively, or we've got the, we've got the palindromist competition. You might find somebody who's like, this is so different and interesting. But as much as I find him interesting and the farm interesting, obviously that's not like
It's a quiet film, It's about
yes.
who is not, not famous. It's not a celebrity. There's no drama. There are no animals dying or anything else that you could describe as sensationalist, aside from maybe climate change, killing the entire planet. That's also, we're also not leading with polar bears starving and all the kind of tropes that we're used to when we're thinking about these topics. So that's definitely a hurdle. So you have, as you said, you have to pull the viewer in a different way, and the viewer has to be willing to give themselves over to a slower tempo. And I think people who've enjoyed the film, despite its kind of darker outlook, have felt it kind of restive, and they really were absorbed by that rhythm of nature and people working with nature.
Okay, so you said music, tempo, and something else. So I wanted to ask you about the score. Who crafted the score, and did you have any philosophies for the score?
So the compositions are by Takenobu. That's his stage name, and he also has a performing group. I had heard his music on the soundtrack of somebody else's film, and then reached out. And the way we worked is that we gave him a solid rough cut of the film, and then kind of indicated which scenes really needed some music. And then it was a lot of back and forth between my editor, Liz Carr, and the composer, back and forth adjusting things. So I think that was a really great experience, having this kind of very responsive kind of approach to, so that if we would say, well, we need something that's slightly different, he would give us a number of different options that we could try out. So overall, I thought it was really a wonderful way to work with somebody.
So I just watched it again yesterday, and I hadn't seen it in, gosh, maybe 2 years potentially, and I really noticed
it came out last fall. So
what'd you say?
It came out last fall, so not 2 years, but a year.
No, I saw it before you had premiered, I believe.
Oh, okay.
So it was at least a year and a half ago, I think. I noticed a real musical shift when you got to Japan. The style of the Illinois filming, the Illinois portion and the Japan portion seemed very different. Was that on purpose? Is that part of the notes that you gave him, or?
Yeah, I don't think we gave him a note to say make it completely different, but I think that was his first, reaction to the material, and I think that's the beauty of bringing another creative person in to also see how he can work off the images, right? So we embraced it, and I think for basically every kind of music segment that we have, there would be a number of options that he would give us. So it was really a lot of back and forth.
I know. I feel like, and I'm not sure because I didn't go backwards, that the Illinois portions were a little less rhythmic and more tonal. And then as soon as you hit Japan, it became kind of like, I don't know, like not staccato, but like a little more rhythmic. I don't know how to describe it, but anyway. What's next for the film?
So, I've always been interested in kind of community engagement. So we've tried to start doing screenings across the state. So rather than just focusing on Chicago. So we've set up a number of screenings in like rural Illinois, if you want. And we really just started setting that up when the pandemic hit. So now we're going to try and do that virtually. So we have some screenings along those lines coming up, and I'm excited about it because it's an audience that's often overlooked by, film distributors and, even filmmakers. We can think outside the box, and how can we, engage with people who we don't usually target with kind of independent cinema. And I think the discussions that we've had have been really rich because they're people who live maybe next door to farms, as you do, or people might write them off as, those are all conservatives. So I think it's a good way to have a dialogue about climate change in kind of settings where we don't expect it to have those conversations.
In your time with this film, that was sort of like my usual wrap-up question, but you opened up something else. Have you encountered any insight as to why these farmers don't believe in climate change? I mean, he talks about that near the end, about how he can see it and how it's important to them. I guess they only see it as a positive right now because their growing season is longer, but any insight on how that he's offered or in your travels about why this has become a politicized issue when there's facts, and I don't mean scientific facts, but literally facts right in front of their eyes? I assume most of these farmers track the weather just as well as he does, and rainfall. How does that become a partisan issue that they don't believe in?
I mean, one thing that plays into that is certainly that most of these farms are propped up by subsidies, right?
Especially now.
Yeah, right. So in some way, it doesn't matter if it's a successful harvest or not, and that's a really sad kind of situation because it will, it won't be. It's not sustainable. That's what I'm trying to say. Well, organic farmers don't get any of those subsidies. They really have to bear the whole brunt of this already. So,
wow.
I'm not sure, what the discussions would be if we had a whole room full of farmers to react. I think that would be something exciting to explore. Maybe I should reach out to our agriculture department and see what they want to do.
I want to wait for the new agriculture department to come in and talk to them about it. All right, and what's next for you? What do you have going on after this film?
So I started a short environmental documentary project a while back, but I couldn't film this summer. I'm just being too cautious. I couldn't continue. So I hope to dive back into that as soon as I can. Plus I teach, so that takes up a lot of time right now with all this online teaching. It's much more challenging.
I'm sure, yes. Especially, do you teach film?
I teach film, so one of the courses that I teach is a production class. So holding up the camera in front of the Zoom camera is not so easy, Like doing this. Like, this is the button you have to push.
Great. Stick around after this. I just wanted to talk to you about something, but I'm going to end the broadcast. Thanks, everyone, for coming out. I hope you enjoyed Seasons of Change on Henry's Farm and enjoyed this discussion. And we'll see you soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you.